Okay, I spoke to the owner, and we have agreed upon a plan for replacing this garbaged, junked board, poor of use thing. I'll show you that in a moment. But on the outside of the amp, I noticed that there are two screws missing that hold the choke in place. And when I open the amp, I see two overlapping holes, as if the choke had been changed, and a really rough, poorly drilled, irregular hole here that these choke wires are coming through. And there's no rubber grommet in this hole. And these wires can, let me get this to focus better. These wires can abrade on these rough surfaces, and these surfaces are very sharp. That's curled bits of steel. It should have a rubber grommet like all the other pass-through holes. So let's look at this choke more closely. Okay, my initial look over the amp, I figured this was original, and it might be a period part. It looks like a Marshall choke, and it has the same amount of discoloration and dirt as everything else, so it has aged for a long time with everything else. Looking at it, it is a Parmico 10 Henry. And there's nothing wrong with a Parmico 10 Henry choke, except I think that the 10 Henry Marshalls sound really stiff compared to others. But it is a high quality choke. I think it would just need to be mounted more correctly. Now, I will talk to the owner. I usually prefer like about a 3 Henry choke in a Marshall, 100 watt. But he's used this amp for a long time, and he may want to keep this. He could also, alternately, he could sell this to someone who's looking for a 10 Henry Parmico. But we'll talk about that later. Yeah, there's a lot of discovery in this amp. As to what we're going to do to replace that messed up original board, we're going to do a turret board. See my amp making videos in the past couple of days for some photos of boards built like this. It's an FR4 fiberglass board, very high quality turrets. This is roughly a mixture of the, say, a 68 through a 72 board here in terms of what the components on here are. And I will talk to the owner about his preferred Marshall sounds, because there are so many variations between 67 and 72. And then some other changes crept in later in the 70s. And I want to get everything voiced just right. Now this is very similar to what they would have had in, say, 69 in terms of the layout. Not exactly. I don't have the turrets out here. I have the turrets here. So I don't have to have resistors at their very, very farthest possible connection. So everything will have a good mechanical connection. The span will be short. Things are still well spaced for a good signal to noise level and lack of channel interaction. I've flipped the bias adjustment pot from sideways to front to back. It's just a lot easier to adjust that way and keeps your hand farther from the B+ connections. Some Marshalls, earlier Marshalls, do the diode bridge in a different configuration. This is easier, and I could have used a single turret here and a single turret here and had it V, but this makes it a lot easier to change individual diodes in the future. And it'll be even prettier in real life. But this will be about as good as it gets when it comes to a Marshall layout. I've got to take very careful measurements of the original board and find where all the holes really, really are going to go, so I can have a template so when I get this board, I can drill the holes exactly where they need to go and mount this using the original mounting hardware. And then I'll drill holes, for all the wires that are going to connect to the tube socket will come out from the bottom through a hole here and come to connect to the turret. And I'll show all that when it's time to do the wiring on the actual board that's built from this plan. But this is definitely the way to go. There's a company that makes replacement PCBs for Superleads and leads through the 2203 and 2204. It's all on the same board. And that was an option that would cost about $15 less than this. And this will just be a higher quality build than any PCB. And as you can look and see, Marshalls are very simple circuits. There's not a lot going on. You have to observe good design principles, which this should exemplify. And in the previous video I said in my future builds going forward I will not use axial electrolytics because they are being phased out. And that's true, but this is not really a sonic audio amp. This is a saving of an old Marshall. So I'm going to put the axials in this one, but I have got the turret spacing so that 20 years from now, if someone needs to change out these bias caps and they have to use radials, the radials will span this distance without an issue. And this other electrolytic here, a radial will span this distance from this turret to this turret. If I had the original turret spacing, which is really wide, that would not be the case. And there are a lot of guys out there making reproduction Marshalls for themselves, and they copy the original turret spacing. I don't get that. Those builds are not going to fool anyone, so it's not like it's going to be an actual 68 just because you have it widely spaced. It makes it really, really difficult to get components that will fit that span because component leads aren't as long as they used to be. So if you're designing one of these and the turrets are out here, move each one, a quarter inch closer or a half inch closer. There's plenty of space, plenty of space. Don't copy ancient mistakes just because they're ancient. Anyway, I'll get this board ordered tomorrow, and this amp will live and sing again.